stuck here. The cops won't bother me. I am about to start working on the fork seals on the fjr1300. As you guys know, I picked this bike up kind of cheap, and the reason I picked it up cheaply is that the fork seals are busted. It's kind of an expensive thing to do if you take it to a shop, but it's not very complex. And I've never done it on a FJR before, but it should be about the same. It's conventional fork, so it's similar to all the other bikes I've had. And I do have the fork seals here already. This is what the seals look like. And we have also the dust seals. So that's pretty much all you need for this. It's a very expensive job to do if you take it to a shop, but if you do it yourself, a fork seal job can be very cheap. It just requires a lot of labor. There is a way of going, the fork seals going up and down, so you have to kind of make sure that you put them in correctly, but I'll show you the right direction of the fork seal. So let's get started. And you're going to use a 16 or 6 millimeter wrench or a hex wrench and just loosen it up. This thing could be kind of tight from never being removed, so you can kind of just leave it there for now. I had a bigger socket, but I don't, so I have a spark plug wrench. I put it backwards, and then I have another one, and then I just kind of do this. You can use an extension pipe like this to make sure you break it, because it's usually on very tight. I do hate that this thing is in the way of getting a good grip on the calipers here. That's kind of a shame that they put it in such a bad place. It's actually kind of disappointing. This is bad engineering. Why couldn't they just make the reflector slightly smaller or put it somewhere else instead of having this here? That's just silly. I mean, I can't fit the wrench behind it. So apparently you can rotate this bit of reflector like this. I think this is just a terrible design by Yamaha. Who the hell wants this? So one of the things to keep in mind is that you don't want your brake calipers to hang while you're doing this. And this one's got really nice steel braided brake lines, so I don't want to damage them. So when I remove this caliper and the reflector is there because you have to, and I like to kind of just put it back like this after I'm done removing the brake caliper. I'll just kind of squeeze it out like this, and I'll put it, I think, in the brake pad itself. This way I don't lose any bolts. This really helps. A lot of times I kind of just lose stuff. I think that's such a terrible design flaw. Here are 12 millimeter socket here and removing these bolts. One of the things I like to use is a bar for leverage. The bar here, and then I'll just break it softly, and there we go. And then I'll do that for the other one. It'll be so much better just keeping everything together. You don't have to tighten it, just this way you don't lose any bolts. You will remove this that holds the brake caliper, and it's like a rubber grommet. This is an 8 millimeter on each side. That's gonna remove the hose. And the reason is this, because normally to change the tires or brakes you don't really need to remove this bolt, but because we're removing the entire front wheel and forks, and there we go, there's that bolt, and then we're going to just put it back on here, and now we're ready to remove the calipers. Drop the bolt back on here. Have a little bit of a string here, and what I'm going to do is just wrap it around my handlebars. Just make a quick knot. Now let's see if I can slide this out. Jeez, it's very difficult to slide out. So I'm just going to, yeah, wrap it around the the bolt. So that was a good idea to keep the bolt on there. It's no big deal. So now let's just slide around this bolt. So the next thing to do is remove the axle. I'll be able to raise the front a little bit better. You have the exhaust there, and you can put a piece of wood so you don't put too much pressure on there. And I do have a jack underneath because that's going to make it a little bit easier to remove the forks and the front wheel. It helps to have somebody helping you remove the wheel and stuff. But here comes the axle, and I'm going to put this aside. And now we should be able to clear the fender. If you twist it, it should be a little bit easier. So there goes the front wheel. It's very difficult to undo this. So what you need to do, and usually what I do with motorcycles, I put the fork, or before I remove the fork, I leave it in the triple tree and it kind of tightens. But the problem with this FJR is that if I put it up here and I try and do it, the bolt won't clear this space. So what I did is I actually bolted it back onto the bottom triple tree, and that nut is there, and I was able to loosen the top nut. So you should try and loosen the top nut before you remove the forks. So that's a little bit of a tip, because I made that mistake of removing the forks, and now I'm just kind of putting it in there just to remove this top bolt. And you put it in there and kind of twist it. Underneath this, there is a bolt in the fork, and I'm using like a 5/16 wrench. You are going to have to work kind of hard to get this out. So one of the things that you should do is loosen this bolt while it's still on the bike, just a little bit, because it's going to be so much harder to remove if it's off the bike. You'll see these bolts right there. You can use a wrench to get through, especially from the underside for the lower triple tree, and then you can slide it down after you loosen the top triple tree bolt. But you do have two sides to do. Go slowly, and you can use a breaker bar that's very long and narrow. Get in there, but you should be able to remove those two bolts easily. Take a breaker bar and carefully kind of push it out, and you're going to have to do this slowly in order to loosen all the bolts. Tough kind of position. I wish these bolts were easy to access. So, and I'm holding the fork, sliding it in carefully. Now, there we go. Nice. The bottom triple tree is loose. Now, the only thing we need to remove is this. You don't have to remove it, just loosen it, and the fork should start sliding down. And this one's a lot easier. It's very easy to access. You have to be careful not to hit the plastic of the bike, and have a good extension that you can slide in and easily kind of push it out. There we go. Be careful with the brake lines. You don't want to damage them. There we go. So that's the bolt we'll be removing. Slide your 6mm wrench in there, and you have to put it in such a way that you're not going to be damaging anything. You can kind of, there we go. So let's get this. As you twist this, I already see the forks coming down. That's how you remove the forks from the bike. Now you just have to carefully slide them down one at a time, and that's it. That's the forks. I definitely should have removed the hugger or the front fender first. Remove this one. That's better. So don't use an impact wrench. Learn from my mistakes. And just put this aside. Underneath here is a nut that's kind of moving around. Hold on with the back of your hand, and then just try not to. There we go. There's that nut. And we're going to pull this aside. And that's that fork. There we go. I'll probably just replace this bolt. So this one is in the back, and there is a nut that you have to kind of hold as you're removing. Now, I should be able to remove this. So with the fork seals, when they leak out of here. There's a dust cap, and then on this part right here, that's where the fork seal is. And it's a pretty inexpensive part. It's like $20 with the fork seal and the dust cap. So what you have to do is pull these two halves out, and they'll separate, and then you clean it all out. And I usually like to really clean this because I don't want to have to keep doing this. So now I have a drain pan, and I undid this bolt, and I'm just going to remove it. And this is where it gets kind of messy, so make sure you have like a pan. And here we go, it's coming out. And now, here comes the oil. I like to try and remove as much as possible. So here's the bolt right here, we'll leave it there. And if you pump the fork, it's gonna come out. Actually, I should probably remove the bolt. It's somewhere here. And do this a few times. And it's kind of dirty. This is probably the first time the oil has ever been changed in this fork. So the other fork has got the bolt already loosened. The bolt in the bottom, it is a little bit difficult to remove, but if you have a vise, that's the way to go. Or loosen it when the wheel is still on the bike. So here is the bolt for a little bit. Notice that there's this top bolt here, and if you were smart, you would have loosened it up a little bit. So what happens is that there's a spring here, and it actually has a lot of pressure. What could happen is if you loosen it and you're not holding it, it could just hit you in the eye. So it's a little bit dangerous. So put your hand on top like this. At the same time, push down on the wrench as you loosen it. And here's the, so you can see it didn't jump out at me, which is perfect. This one's a little bit different than what I'm used to. So here is all the internals. This is that piston, I guess. Normally, what you have is all of this kind of comes out in parts from what I've seen in other bikes. This is one big unit. These FJRs are a little bit different than what I expected for the fork assembly. It's like one big unit. Go ahead and remove this top bolt. Make sure you put your hand around it, because it's one whole piece of the internals, which is something I've never seen in a bike, so it's kind of cool. This is one long piece inside the FJR fork. I'm kind of amazed that it actually looks like this. I was not expecting it, and that's the very bottom of it. So we have to remove this top part, and the way to do it is you take a 17 millimeter to put up here on the top, and then you take this and you loosen this up. And it should take some time. I've already pried it off, so it's going to be easy for me. But this part comes out because we have to pump this top piston and show you. So now this part will come out, but you have to hold on to this nut here while you're undoing this one. You need to pump this up quite a bit when you put oil, because you need to work all the gaps out of there, the air bubbles that are going to be in the oil. So the dust seal is right here. If you take a pair of pliers or a screwdriver, just kind of cram in there and kind of push it up. You don't have to worry about ruining the dust seal, because we're going to be reusing it, or we have already a new seal, so this one doesn't really need to be saved. So that's the dust seal right here, and it's pretty much trash, but normally these seals don't really go bad. It's the fork seal. To get to the fork seal, we still cannot remove it yet. There's usually like a clip, a piece of steel in here, and you take a very small screwdriver and kind of try and lift it up. Sometimes there's edges where you can get at it, but the fork seal is actually in here. But in order to get to it, we need to get a screwdriver in there. Just kind of, and I'm already like touching it. It's a little bit difficult to see on camera. There we go. If you guys are hearing that noise, that's the clip, and there we go. That's the clip that just came out. So make sure this is a retainer clip that holds the fork seal. So this is kind of like the security of it. So take that out, and now we should be ready to remove the fork seal. So the fork seal is really just on there by pressure. So what we do is we take this and we just hammer it out like this, and we do it just, and there we go. That is the fork seal. This piece right here at the bottom of the fork is that fork seal, and I'm actually looking at it. There's like some crud on the sides, and that's it. This is the seal, and all you have to do is slide it out. Slide this out. Make sure which way it faces up. That's important. So there's a side that faces up and one that faces down. So the more closed part of the seal is up. So this part is up. Let's take a look at the seal. It is the more closed part, and when we turn it around, you see that there's more exposed, like a little bit more exposed. I believe that this is just where the oil faces. So the bigger part of the fork seal is down. The part that's more sealed is up. So what I like to do is just to clean my fork, remove any contaminants. Another thing to note is that sometimes this Teflon piece gets worn out. I'm like looking at it, it's actually in pretty good shape. The Teflon, these two pieces, sometimes you can get like these rebuild kits for that. Most of the time they do not get that worn, but I've had a couple of bikes and they were kind of worn, so keep that in mind. If it doesn't have like that coating to it, and this one does, you need to replace it. This should just go in. So normally you need a fork seal driver to put it in here, but there are other ways. You can just take a piece of PVC the way I usually do it, and I just kind of hit it and it goes down. So we are ready to put the top part of the fork onto the bottom, and you just have to make sure everything is nice and clean. And I like to kind of go inside here, get all of this nice and clean. This bushing goes in first, like this, and it should stop over there. Then you have the washer that goes on top and falls on the fork. There is a piece inside of the lower part of the fork leg. Piece here that goes on this part of the leg, and what I do is I take the lower and I just kind of slide it in. Notice we don't have our fork seal in just yet. Now it's in there all the way at the bottom. One thing I'm going to be doing is I have the new fork seal here. You have to make sure you get the right direction up, looking at the surface and finding where the writing is. The part where the writing is the top part, faces the top of the bike. And then take your hands and kind of squeeze it in. That way it's not going to go in a very odd position. And now it's in the very bottom of it. So what you have to do is like take your hand as best as you can and try to even it up all the way around, because you don't want the fork seal to go oddly into the bike, and you should be able to like move this freely up and down. What I like to do is take the old fork seal over, because I'm going to be hammering this with this sort of system. I'm going to be like hammering it down, and I don't want to damage that fork seal. So that's what we're going to be doing. At this point, you should hear a difference in tone, and I'm going to pull up the old fork seal. And here comes the old fork seal. So the fork seal is in there. It takes a while to kind of push it in, and I use the old seal so I can put it on top and then use the 2/2 of the PVC pipe to kind of hammer it in this way. You could even kind of push it off a little bit to the side and use a mallet to push it down, because you don't want to scratch the sleeve of the fork, but also when you kind of push it this way, you'll be damaging the old fork seal and not the new fork seal. We're going to use just a little grease, and we're going to put it inside here. So here is that seal, or the clip, and I'm going to just drop it in. And make sure that the open side kind of faces to the back of the fork. So now once it starts to go in, just take a small screwdriver and you should hear it kind of clip in. And there we go. Make sure that the fork slides up and down smoothly. The dust caps, there's only one way of putting them. The soft part is to the top, and you're just going to slide it down and use your fingers to kind of push it in. So this is the fork oil I'll be using. It's the 10 weight Bel-Ray fork oil. You can get any oil that you want. Some people go with 15 weight, even 20 weight on the FJR, but I'm just going to go with a stock weight. I am going to fill each with about 710 milliliters. It calls for 700 to 750 milliliters per leg. I like to put like in between 720, 710, something like that. The important thing is that you want to make sure that you put the same amount of oil per leg. And also one of the things that the manual says is that you have to have a 100 millimeter air gap. We are going to be putting the internals onto the fork leg, and should be able to slide in, and there we go, that's in there. And now at the bottom, if you guys remember, there's a Allen key that we need to tighten. That's going to tighten the internals with the external part of the fork leg from underneath, and it's tight on there. One of the things I've done is I measured 750 milliliters, 740 to 750 milliliters per bottle, and I'm going to go ahead and start pouring it into my fork. I bolted the internals, so I should be able to just go ahead and start. The important thing is having the exact same measurement for each fork leg. You don't want it to have a really weird balance out all the air bubbles from the rod. So Yamaha recommends you do this like 20 times. I actually go overboard, and I spend quite a bit of time doing this because I don't want any air in my system of the oil. Make sure you go all the way up. It's like one full stroke. And you should start seeing like air bubbles come out. We want the oil to start coming up. Now that you pumped this up quite a bit and there's no more air bubbles, what we're going to be doing is putting the top part of the fork in there. Just screw it back on there, and you're going to need your screwdriver or your wrench. To screw this part onto the bottom of the screw leg, of the fork leg. So what I'm using here is just a big wrench, and if you use like a long wrench socket, you can get past all of this stuff. and you just twist it, and we are pretty much done with one fork leg. Now we're going to do the other fork leg. I just finished doing my fork seals on the FJR, and I put a new tire in the front, so I'm curious about how it rides. And I also put a new windscreen, and I put this temporary bracket until I can make a new one. But I do have a bunch of oil still in the seals here, because a lot of the oil starts to drip down, but I want to make sure I clean it, because I want to be able to see if it's leaking again. So I really hope I don't have to do this again. It's a lot of work to change the fork seals. I don't wish this on anybody. Just want to take the bike up and down the street, even though there's a lockdown. And I also wanted to see how this bike is definitely a lot bulkier to ride than the NC. Alright, brakes are okay. Man, with this windscreen, it's fantastic. Like, you don't get any wind on you. It's like a car. Actually, let me go over some of these humps, see how the forks are doing. I don't know if I like this big windscreen. It's so big, and I thought that the other windscreen was pretty effective. The braking was pretty bad. Right now it's still pretty bad, but I think it's because the oil from the discs is still there. I might have to remove the pads and scrub them out. Well, I'd love to take this thing for a nice long ride, but there's a lockdown. Brakes are still not very good. I'm gonna have to look into that, but at least I know that the suspension is okay. Seems to be okay. I think we did a decent job with the fork seals. I hope to never do these again on this bike. Man, fork seals are such a pain in the ass, guys. This is how you do a fork seal on a fjr1300, and it's the same system for other bikes. I'm sure I missed some steps along the way, but this is the usual way I do the fork seals. And normally on these bikes, it doesn't really break fork seals very much, but that's how you do it. If you guys have any questions, post in the comments below, and I'll be sure to write something if I know how to help you guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.